Lethbridge City Council voted 7-2 to go ahead with a bid for the 2022 BRIER. Now, if the city was to land the event, it would be great news for both curling fans and business owners alike. To discuss this in more detail is the Mayor of Lethbridge, Spearman, joins me once again here in studio. Welcome back to BCN.
Happy to be here, Hal.
It's wonderful. Now let's talk about landing the BRIER. Would bring some big bucks to the city, but at the same time, you got to spend a little bit of money too, don't you? You have to spend money to make money.
Yeah, so it's $1 million, but that's about $650,000 in cash, about $350,000 in-kind services. You only pay that if you are successful. And it looks like a tremendous thing to host. The television coverage is probably better than the Memorial Cup. There's a full week of coverage, national coverage. Every province is represented, and the territories as well. So great television coverage, great exposure for the city of Lethbridge. For $1 million, the previous hosts have generally gained about another $10 to $15 million in business revenue for the city. So those cities, the restaurants and their hotels are full for a week, and that would be a tremendous event for the City of Lethbridge to host.
Two councillors, though, Belinda Crowson was one of them, said, you know what, that $1 million could be better spent elsewhere. So how do you respond to that?
We always make those kind of decisions, and they're not always unanimous. What are the city's priorities? In this case, the idea was, how can we stimulate the economy after the COVID recovery?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, what are some of the criteria for actually landing the BRIER? And who are some of our biggest competition then, 2022?
Well, Curling Canada would evaluate the various bids, but certainly what's the...
Look at the facilities here, right?
Yeah, facilities are good. What's the past reputation of the city in terms of curling? So we've hosted the Scotties twice. We've hosted the World Men's. We've hosted the World Mixed qualifications. We have a great reputation for supporting curling events and a great venue to host them.
Now, Council also voted to cancel the $1.75 million 6-mile Coulee Pathway project recently. And why was that?
Generally, we were hearing from the community that the people who are currently using that pathway didn't want the improvements that were proposed. So specifically the shale pathways.
So the limestone, I guess?
Yeah, the limestone.
Right.
We thought there needed to be more consultation, so we put the project on the shelf while that consultation takes place. So there seems to be some miscommunication. Our administration said there was consultation, but certainly we had an avalanche of complaints. At the same time, we have to balance the nature and the purpose of the river valley and make sure that we're not harming the river valley. And we have to address safety issues. If it's a city pathway, what's the state of the bridges? What's the state of all the infrastructure along there? So can people use it safely? We certainly don't want to be in a situation where people get hurt using the pathway.
The province announced the launching of phase 2 of the economy, relaunching the economy here. A lot of business owners I've spoken with said we should have relaunched like a month ago already. They're finding it very difficult. But then some other business owners are saying, well, hold off. We're going to actually wait another few more weeks before we reopen, because they're a little concerned about a second wave. What are you hearing right now?
Well, nobody wants a second wave. The worst thing that could happen to us in the city of Lethbridge is that we go backwards. So there's a lot of concern with past viruses about a second wave, and of course there is no cure, there's no inoculation, and the virus has not gone away. We still have live cases, a small number of them, each week in the city of Lethbridge. But what we want to do is make sure the community is safe, that we follow the guidelines from the medical officer of health, that we ensure that we keep each other safe and prevent a flare-up or a recurrence. We're very concerned about what might be happening in the fall, and we want to make sure that businesses open and stay open. We want to make sure community facilities open and stay open, and we need to put processes and procedures in place to make sure everyone stays safe.
What do you want to say to that business owner that didn't survive the COVID-19 pandemic and had to shut their doors here in Lethbridge? What do you want to say to them specifically?
That's a tough one. And, we are trying to do the best we can to support businesses and make sure everybody survives. We hope that people will continue to invest and maintain their businesses, and we'll be looking at ways. So we have a committee looking at ways to support businesses going forward.
Municipalities obviously are hurting right now across the province. Council recently passed a motion supported by the Alberta Urban Municipalities Association to approve a 1% provincial sales tax to support local capital projects. Many Albertans I've spoken with, though, Chris, are dead set dead set against a PST to say, where's the Alberta advantage? There's no provincial sales tax. This is Alberta.
Yep. So the provincial government is looking at phasing out the Municipal Sustainability Initiative, which is funding that goes to municipalities to fund capital projects. So there's no commitment beyond 2021. So what's an alternative to that? So the motion that was proposed and passed at City Council is that instead there could be a 1% sales tax. Now that motion is only passed at Lethbridge City Council for us to take that resolution forward and discuss it at the Alberta Urban Municipalities Association annual convention. It would have to be passed by all member municipalities. It is basically a point for discussion. It's a philosophical discussion. How do municipalities acquire money for capital projects going forward?
What are some of the big capital projects right now that we should really address and attack?
Well, what we're looking at is catalytic economic projects. So things like the Lethbridge Exhibition Project, the airport project, funding.
Another bridge to the west side?
Broadband. The ROI on a bridge to the west side is zero, but and the cost only $250.
Well, not for you and I. We live on the west side. Come on.
Yep. Okay. But that'll be a challenge, I think.
I know.
I think now that people have learned that many people in the city can work at home and do that type of thing. You know, we might have pushed off the third bridge from 2030 to 2040.
Right. So. Okay. Let's talk about this $10 billion class action lawsuit against Big Pharma that the city of Lethbridge is joining in on. Why did you decide to join the party?
Well, municipalities are actually in by default, but we may be able to offer our own experience here. There hasn't been a city in Alberta that was more negatively affected than Lethbridge by the opioid crisis. So we had learned experience through our ELCOU group. We talked to people who were addicts, and they didn't want to be addicts. Some of them were sports athletes who had incurred injuries, and they were given painkillers to deal with it. And then when the prescription stopped, they were addicted. And then we had other people who had workplace injuries and had been encouraged by the WCB to go back to work and were given painkillers, and they were addicted. So we have a lived experience here.
And a lot of seniors too are dealing with
Yep,
osteoarthritis.
Seniors, yep.
You know,
they were given painkillers. So we have seniors who were addicts as well. So the drug companies provided these drugs. The physicians were encouraged to prescribe them, and we have a unique lived experience in the city of Lethbridge, which could be beneficial to a lawsuit. So we we'll investigate the possibility of becoming a co-plaintiff with the city of Grand Prairie in Alberta and offer that personal experience to those providing the lawsuit.
now, last time we chatted, the province was pitching in with some funding to really help attack the opioid crisis in our city. You know, I mean, COVID is one thing, but there's still a drug crisis in our city. How's that coming in regards to the INTOX and DETOX beds?
Well, probably coming a little slower than I would like. We're hoping that the supported housing project will be moving forward shortly. That's an $11 million project to house people who are chronic addicts, people who have mental health issues that they will never overcome. Those types of, so we need to accommodate those people, but we need people to move from addiction into recovery. Certainly a big challenge in terms of people recovering from addiction and turning the corner on that. We're seeing some troubling trends this year in terms of what's happening with the drugs. The drugs are getting stronger. They're seeing more fatal overdoses across the country.
Well, from fentanyl to carfentanil, also meth last time we spoke. That's become a real issue in our city as well.
With the border closed, the drug supply is different, and they're seeing much stronger drugs. So many more responses in terms of overdoses, and people are using out in the community, which is high risk. So we're seeing people. We've had a death in a West Side park. With the summer weather here, we can anticipate there will be more drug use out in the communities, and you know that's a challenge going forward.
How can we really prevent those drugs from entering our city? Even coming into the city.
Our crime suppression team from Lethbridge Police Services is doing a tremendous job. They've had a lot of successes, but the supply of drugs is just unrelenting. And with a closed border, the drugs are still getting through.
How about a full-time scan unit? Last time we chatted as well, it would be nice to have that here. And so once we shut down those drug houses, they're shut down permanently, and we don't have another one pop up, 3 houses over.
Yeah, it would be great to have a full-time scan unit here, but so far the province hasn't approved that. They're still based out of Edmonton and Calgary, and the province is preferring to use a program called ALERT, where police services work together, and but we certainly need the capacity to shut down drug houses in the city of Lethbridge.
What have you heard from the province in regards to the supervised consumption site at Arches? Have they given any indication so far about moving or shutting it down entirely?
That announcement is entirely within the province's purview,
Yep.
and we're
Have they given you any indication, though? Have they
We're
talked?
anticipating a decision later. Their focus is definitely on funding recovery rather than harm reduction. So we have actually 5 facilities in the city of Lethbridge that provide various forms of recovery, and they're all underutilized. And it's about the approach that's taken, I think. I think there needs to be new ways of addressing and encouraging people to leave addiction. They basically need a fresh start.
Some politicians I've spoken with when I used to work in Parliament Hill in Ottawa say we'd love to see all drugs decriminalized, not legalized, but decriminalized in Canada. What would you think of that kind of a philosophy? A similar model to what they have in Portugal.
It would be controversial for sure. If the federal government provided the drugs, the crime issue would go away. That's the advantage of that program. People wouldn't have to steal. There would be, if they could get the drugs and they could be supervised while they were using them, and then they could be weaned off the drugs, that would be an approach to be considered. But that is, again, we're dealing with the side effects, and the responsibility for solving the issue and coming up with the solutions really belongs to the provincial and federal government.
The Alberta Taxpayers Federation recently came out with a list of some of the cities, municipalities, where they're spending a lot per person. Medicine Hat was number 1. I think Lethbridge came in around number 3. Why are we spending so much per person here? Where can we maybe trim the fat a little bit?
We provide a high level of service. So the challenge is we have a police service, for example, rather than the RCMP. There's a higher cost to having your own police force. Medicine Hat has their own police force. In Medicine Hat's case, they provide additional utilities that the City of Lethbridge doesn't, so they are high on the list because they provide a gas utility. We also have tremendous facilities, so I think we have the second biggest recreational facility in the province with the ATB Centre. There are costs to provide those levels of services. We have more parks per capita, maintained parks per capita than other cities, so there's a cost to maintaining parks. We're doing our best to control costs. 2020 will be the first year in 20 years when there's been a 0 tax increase in the city of Lethbridge, and we have implemented the KPMG reviews, the operational reviews, to see where we can find efficiencies in all the departments across the city. And we're hoping to have additional recommendations so that next year we'll be looking at ways to minimize the possibility of a tax increase in 2021.
How about potentially putting more money into the police service as well in dealing with a lot of the drug and crime issues in our city?
We have provided additional funds to the police for 3 new programs in the current budget, but certainly there's pushback across North America about how much policing is costing. So policing is about 23% of our total municipal tax budget, and certainly people are saying, should it be so high? Is there another way to address the issues? So,
and what about the Watch program? Is that really making a difference in our community?
I believe that it is. It's one of the innovative programs that was brought in. They have worked with the community. They have helped identify overdoses, provided supports. So that too is controversial in the city at the moment, and the Watch program funding expires at the end of 2020, and council will have to make a decision as to whether we would continue that.
The local state of emergency is officially over here in Lethbridge, so that's good news. How did you come to that point?
We got to the point now that we're We have flattened the curve in Lethbridge, and that's happened across the province. The province has removed their state of emergency, and so we've done that in Lethbridge. And what that allowed us to do was acquire facilities. Those decisions were made by the Director of Emergency Services and the Emergency Response Committee. So in order to access facilities, provided an additional homeless shelter and make sure that people could be safely social distanced, needed to acquire facilities. And so those decisions had to be made quickly. There was no political involvement in those decisions, but that's what state of local emergency does.
And I noticed too that the homeless shelter is leaving the Fritz-Sick Gymnasium and going back to 2nd Avenue North, which is good too. Let's talk about how the city decides when to reopen some of the spray parks and some of the other areas as well, like the ATB Center and even the Cora Van Ray YMCA swimming pool. I mean, that's, I guess, going to take a while to fill that pool.
Yep.
But, we're looking like mid-July, maybe at the earliest. It's still a ways off.
Yeah, I think I've heard dates like July the 11th.
Right.
And, so what we want to do is get those facilities open as quickly as possible, but we have to have the procedures in place. And many in the community are frustrated. We opened up the parks, and people said, well, why aren't the washrooms open? Well, we don't have the staff to go and clean the washrooms after every use. We need to make sure we have put procedures in place and let people know that they have to be responsible. They have to make sure that they are safe, their kids are safe, that people understand the rules. So when it comes to opening up a spray park, there will be rules and regulations. It just won't be business as usual.
So social distancing still very important?
People will have to social distance. People will have to supervise their children because 4-year-olds don't social distance very well. And, that's just things we need to make sure that the responsibilities are outlined very carefully in order to make sure that we don't have risks of further pandemic and spreading of the virus.
Yeah, that's great to hear. It's funny when you talk about the kids social distancing. I remember Timbits hockey. They look like all together on the ice going around. And or when they play soccer as well, they're not spread out. They're all in a nice little group together. And that's the way it was meant to be. Mayor Chris Spearman, thanks so much for joining me in studio again today.
Always great to be here, Hal.